Dragi gledatelji, dragi slušatelji, dobrodošli na podcast Ideje.hr. Podcast koji je izrastao iz istoimenog portala kojeg vjerujem dobro poznajete. Ja sam Domagoja Novokmeta, novinar Al Jazeere. Velika mi je čast što sam dobio priliku razgovarati sa ljudima koji su u mogućnosti vrlo duboko, vrlo ozbiljno analizirati događaje koji određuju zbivanja u društvu danas, sa onima koji u tim događajima sudjeluju, koji na njih utječu. Naši gosti danas su dvoje Njujorčana, dvoje sveučilišnih profesora, dvoje filozofa, ljudi koji iz prvog reda imaju priliku gledati ono što se događa u Sjedinjenim Američkim Državama, ali i svijetu nakon pobjede Donalda Trumpa. S nama su Višnja i Timom Maudlinom. Welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Tim, for the beginning, you are based in New York, but you are cooperating with Croatian academia also.
Yes, I founded 6 years ago or so the John Bell Institute for the Foundations of Physics, which is not associated with NYU, and I've always been hoping to have a base for it here in Croatia. And in this week, have secured an agreement with the University of Split. We'll have meetings and summer schools and so on in Split at the beautiful location there that once was Tito's summer residence. And so we're very, very excited about that. And we hope to have all kinds of things going on that will bring people into Croatia and into Split.
We'll be glad to follow that story also. But going back now to the United States and the world after Trump winning elections, Vishnya, how would you describe this moment in United States, American society?
I think the best thing to say it's scary because we just don't know what is going to happen. And usually, when something happens in the world, you're looking forward and you think this might happen and this might happen and this might happen. At this point, there are so many variables. What Trump is going to do, how he's going to turn. And unfortunately, the world depends on Trump. Depends on the United States. But in this case, we are all on the whims of Trump, what he decides. So we are very scary in the United States, and I think the world is scared of what is going to happen.
Tim, you said me yesterday while we were preparing that the key issue is the fact that we cannot be sure which mechanism will survive, will be strong enough while Trump is testing democracy as itself.
So, yeah, I think it's very clear that when the country was set up in its present situation with the Constitution we have, that the people who wrote the Constitution very much feared concentrating all the power in any one place, in any one person, especially really for them, any person elected, because they were worried about demagogues and people who can whip up the electorate and so on. So there are really several circuit breakers in place. One is federalism, that is, the federal government as a whole should not have unlimited powers. Some powers devolve to the states, and the federal government just shouldn't have the ability to tell the states what to do on certain issues. Trump is trying to break that down. I mean, he's trying to go in and tell New York City they can't have congestion pricing for cars, which the federal government has no place in that. And then within the federal government, the system of checks and balances was set up so that the executive and the legislative and the judicial systems all checked each other, and the president certainly was not supposed to have unbounded power. What Trump is attempting to do is create unbounded power for himself. But he's being blocked by judges now. There will be blocks to laws that will occur because many laws he wants will not pass in the Senate. The question is, we've never had this much pressure from the inside attempting to basically destroy the system that was put in place to avoid autocracy. And nobody knows how far he'll get. Immediately right now, it depends a lot on the judiciary. And at the end, that's going to end up on the Supreme Court.
And then everything will depend on Supreme Court. And we know the catch with Supreme Court today. Are you afraid of that moment?
At the moment, we've had some good decisions by it's a slim majority, 5-4, right? It was a close thing. But at the moment, there seem to be 5 justices who will certainly stand up and block things. Many of these things should be blocked 9-0 because they're just plainly unconstitutional and plainly illegal. But no system is self-executing. No matter how you set up the system, you rely on the people in those jobs to do their jobs. And sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. And we're going to find out who does and who doesn't. And nobody knows yet.
Vishnya, are you afraid of the result or answer to that question? Will the people do their job in the key moments?
I mean, the problem is there is so much attack on judiciary system. And what is happening right now, so judge just yesterday decided that whatever Trump is doing is actually unconstitutional. He doesn't have those powers. Those powers belong to Congress. Immediately after that decision, what happened was a huge attack from the right on the judges, on that judge, and calling to be removed. So one way that they're going attacking judiciary. And in these decisions, which Tim mentioned, what happened in this 5-4 decision, Amy Coney Barrett, who was appointed by Trump, his last appointee of the Supreme Court, she was decisive vote. And now there's lots of attack on her. I mean, Roberts, who is the Chief Justice, right? He's also, you never know how he's going to vote. He wasn't appointed by Trump. He's also a Republican, or appointed by Republican. But the moment the judge decides something what Trump and his base doesn't like, there is attack on that judge. So can we resist that? I don't know.
And actually, the question is very serious because we also have now the track record of Republicans who didn't have power to go against Trump, who are not strong enough, even if they were humiliated before, even if they openly said something against him at the beginning.
Yes, I mean, but now you again have to be careful about what power you're talking about. Any Republican who opposes Trump, they will try to eliminate them in the next election, right? They'll primary them. They'll get somebody to knock them out so they're not reelected. That's in the hands of the party and the electorate. When you attack a judge, the only way to remove a judge is to impeach them and then convict them. And quite honestly, that's not going to happen. No judge will be removed by that means. So yeah, there's a lot of noise saying, oh, we need to impeach this judge, blah, blah, blah. It's just noise. That can't happen because, as we saw, Trump got impeached 2 times and he was never convicted because conviction requires a supermajority in the Senate. There's no way any of these judges will be removed by that means. So yeah, there's a lot of noise about it. I'm not worried that that can work. Not by any possible constitutional means.
Only maybe by soft power, making pressure on persons.
Judges have lifetime appointments. They're not. You can't pressure them the way you can elected officials by saying, we'll make sure that you're not reelected. So they just have to stand up and do their jobs.
As a result of that, they're calling on limiting judges how long they can serve. Right? Mm-hmm. There is more and more movement to limit. That judges are not appointed for life, but rather for a certain number of years, including Supreme Court. And honestly, I do think in the case of Supreme Court, it would be much better if judges are not appointed for life. That they have a certain limit. Could be 10 years, I don't know. But it's the problem right now. It just a certain random happens if somebody dies and whoever is the president. And if somebody, like in the case when Obama was a president, when Mitch McConnell decided, no, I will not even bring for a vote new Supreme Court justice, and then you get Trump, which is, you think, it's not illegal. So you have to differentiate between what is illegal and what is not appropriate, what is simply not being done before that. The same like certain things that Trump does nowadays. It's not all of them are illegal, like being with Tesla car in front of in the White House, but it's completely inappropriate. It's not something what we would expect from a president, and never was it expected.
Trump also, he doesn't target just judges. He targets academia, that's at least my perspective, in general, targeting universities, making pressure on them, making pressure of particular projects, curriculums, professors. What's behind that?
I mean, the thing to bear in mind is Trump targets everything. Trump targeted the Gulf of Mexico, for goodness sake, right? To change its name to the Gulf of America, which is just silly, right? I mean, it doesn't accomplish anything. Nobody's going to do it at the end. And he said this wasn't hidden. When he was running this time, he said, I am your vengeance, right? I am your vengeance. My main consideration, in fact, isn't really to make your life better, to bring down prices, to make life more affordable. It's to take revenge on everybody I perceive as an enemy, which is anybody who says anything bad about him. And sure, lots of people in academia do, because they give facts, for example, that show that what he says is nonsense, and he gets mad at them. And he wants to use every lever of power available to exact revenge. Now, in the case of academia, the main lever is money, right? So there are these research grants and so on that come from the federal government. A judge has just again reaffirmed that he does not have the power to simply say, we're not going to give you this money, because the money was, Congress voted that money, appropriated that money for that purpose. And the president does not have the power to simply override the will of Congress at his whim. So a lot of this stuff will be overturned. The money will come back. Right now, we're in a very chaotic situation, and the universities don't understand the timeline, and when they'll get the money. And so they're saying, we're not going to hire people next year. Hopefully, it'll take some months for all of this to sort through up probably the Supreme Court and settle out. Hopefully it'll be, not as terrible when we're done as it looks right now.
But Vishnyom, you told me that you can already see moves made by universities that show that, they are stepping back, trying not to make Trump angry, trying to do what pleases him.
Absolutely. There is some kind of self-censorship. As I said, 148 universities now announced they will not officially have a position on anything. When you think they immediately, when Israel was attacked, it was attack on Hamas. When police brutality happened and Black Lives Matters, universities were on the side of Black Lives Matters, and so on. So they were always making some kind of position, which is usually, even though it was labeled left, it was usually, universities try to be ethical. I'm not saying always they are, but it's some kind of have a moral position of what is happening in the world. When Russia attacked Ukraine, of course, they all stood with Ukraine, the presidents of different universities. Nowadays, those very same presidents announced they will not anymore have these announcements, what they stand for. This is in some deep sense self-censorship. And that is to me also very scary. And it happens in academia, it happens in media, it happens everywhere. The people now think what I'm going to write, what I'm going to say, because I don't know what the consequences are going to be with this government. You see what happened at Columbia with this Khalil, the student who was in demonstrations, pro-Palestinians demonstrations. This is American right, freedom to speak. And he is arrested. He's in Louisiana. He didn't have a right to talk to his lawyer. Now, judge actually yesterday also decided he has to be allowed to talk to his lawyer. They want to deport him. He has a green card. That means he has equal rights with any American citizen. He's not illegal immigrant or anything like that. But the pressure, and what Tim said, yes, we can count on judiciary, but it's very, very slow.
And let me say one more thing, because it's absolutely right that universities fairly regularly, and I think quite properly, would take some positions on some issues. Sometimes they were based in moral considerations, but what's even worse, often they're based in scientific considerations. Is there climate change? Yes. Are people causing it? Yes. Would it help to get rid of fossil fuels? Yes. Those are not moral questions. Those are scientific questions, and they've been answered. And it's really the responsibility of a university where the scientists do their work to stand up for them and to say, but now if you say, oh, but climate change is a politically controversial issue, therefore we won't say anything about it, that is plainly the university not doing what it should do, which is just to broadcast the actual scientific results of academic research.
I think that we can say that also when we talk about human rights and how Trump and his allies are dealing with human rights. Do you think that we took a level of human rights for granted and that we made terrible mistake following the political discussions which are now mainstream in the United States because of Trump?
Absolutely. Lots of these things which you took for granted in the U.S. I live in the U.S. longer than I lived here. So I had a long history watching what is happening in politics. Of course, there were always ups and downs. There were Tea Party at some point. There were these commotions, but certain things you can always count on. Certain things you can always count on. You could count on freedom of speech. You can count on human rights. Whenever something happened, there is somebody to defend you. ACLU defends Nazis in Michigan to march through town because it's a freedom of speech. We might disagree with certain things. As I said recently, even Wall Street Journal wrote against that. I might disagree with your speech, but you have to have right to say what you want. Not that you're under the threat, I'm going to arrest you if you say something I don't like. That we took at the bedrock of American democracy.
Do you, Tim, agree that Trump moves can be defined as freedom just for us?
Yes.
And there is a question, who are those us in different situations?
Well, except with, as I said, Trumpism isn't a political movement because its only foundational principle is what's good for Trump or what Trump wants. I mean, at a certain point, the Republican Party always had a party platform. They would have a convention and they would write a party platform that this is what the party stands for. And literally under Trump, they said, we're not going to have a platform anymore because it's just whatever Trump wants. Right? So that's the only principle there. So if somebody says something mean about Trump, oh, that's illegal. Somehow you put them in jail for it. He has no commitment to the Constitution. He has no commitment to rights. He's a commitment to, I'm the guy in power and I can have whatever I want. That's his only principle.
It's already the second time you mentioned Republicans as people who gave up a way. So do you think that we can count on the Republicans as a political group, as any kind of subject in political life?
I think many people believe, I certainly believe, that the country needs a strong pair of parties. I mean, there are lots of political issues. How highly do you tax? What does that look like? Exactly how much does the government provide and not? There are a lot of scope for reasonable disagreement. And sometimes those disagreements can only be settled by having a vote and your side wins or your side loses. You need two strong parties for that, two parties that each stand for certain principles. The problem is what we've seen is that the Republicans have thrown everything they claim to be their principles out the window. They used to be for free trade, against tariffs, against isolationism. They used to be in support of NATO. They used to be in support of Ukraine. They used to think that it was important to have strong alliances. Trump decides, I don't want any of this, and they just roll over. At this point, many people believe, I believe, that the only way out of this is for the present Republican Party to be defeated so massively in the next election that it has to regroup and come back to have some actual principles. Because right now it doesn't have any.
And Democrats? How do you see their position right now?
I think the Democrats are, I think they're certainly united against what Trump is doing. In the Senate, the Democrats have said, we will not vote for this proposal they have, which in the past, I would say the Democrats often would save the Republicans. I mean, they did under Trump. It's like the Republicans couldn't get their own people to vote for, a continuing resolution to keep the government open. And the Democrats would provide all these votes saying, well, it'd be really bad for the country for the entire government to shut down, right? They won't keep it open, so we'll step up. It's so extreme now that certainly in the Senate, they said, no, we will not provide any votes for this. And the Republicans don't have enough. So they realize that their only option at this point, they don't have a reliable negotiating partner to find any reasonable compromises on the other side. And they've realized what they need to do is go into opposition. The Republicans officially control the House and the Senate and the presidency. Okay, you guys go do we're not going to help you. And let the people see what the result is. And the people are seeing the result. And that's why
You think they already see it?
Oh yeah, you just look at the polls. Trump is now underwater in favorability. He was never above 50%, but right after the election, he was, 7% more favorable than unfavorable. Now he's below. And it's just, look at what's happened. There's a tariff. There's not a tariff. Okay. I'm going to bring down the price of eggs. The price of eggs goes through the roof, right? I'm going to arbitrarily take a chainsaw and fire every single person in the federal government I can fire. Nobody likes this. And Republicans literally have been told by their leadership, do not have town hall meetings with your own constituents. Because whenever they have them, the constituents who come out are angry and yelling at them, saying, why are you allowing this? And their response is, then we'll stop having the meetings. Trump is not, it is very clear this is not making Trump or the Republicans popular, just the opposite.
Just a little bit more about the freedom of speech. You mentioned already media under pressure. Do you think that mainstream media are in some kind of Trump's trap, trying to prove to Trump that they are fair, professional, and so on, and actually by doing that, just giving Trump and his allies more ammunition?
Oh, absolutely. We talk about New York Times. New York Times is a good example of that. For decades, they were calling New York Times left-wing media and so on. New York Times is not left-wing media. It never been, right? Reporting facts, and you probably know yourself as a journalist, reporting facts doesn't mean taking sides, right? Facts are facts. But in nowadays climate, if you don't like a fact, you accuse the media of being biased. New York Times was for decades accused of being biased. And nowadays in CNN and so on, everybody is biased. What they were trying, unfortunately, in order not to be called biased, trying to give voices to the other side, even though they might be completely irrational, unscientific, irrelevant, and so on. And this is this kind of when media falls in. A little bit problem nowadays with media is we have so many different channels, as you know, so many different newspapers. In the old time, in the United States, when it was Cronkite and everybody listened to Cronkite, there was some kind of authority on the facts, and everybody got the same facts, at least. Nowadays, people don't get the same facts. You'd go and choose.
I have mine, you have yours. Facts.
Exactly. And that's the problem nowadays. I want to go and find my echo chamber, and I'm going to always find my echo chamber in some media, whatever I want to. But at least these mainstream medias, what it used to be, they should not try to fall under these attacks. Look, we are reporting facts. I just want to say something apropos what Tim said about Democrats and Republicans. Being in that country, as I said, for such a long time, 36 years, what happened, Democratic Party was always diverse. Because of that, it never voted unifying. In a unifying way, right? It was very hard to put Democrats that vote together just for this. This is the first time now, even though they are very diverse, that it's reversal, that they decided they're going to go against Republicans as a whole. Republicans from time of Reagan, who explicitly asked them that, you always have to vote, no matter what, you always have to vote for Republicans. It has never been like that with Democrats, because Democrats is a very broad coalition, people of color, right, sexual orientation, whatever you want to, right? They are all under that umbrella. And Republicans were always much more either whites or, Southern people and so on, which have a very different agenda, and they could be unified.
Yes, I just wanted to come back about your question about the media, because I think there's something that maybe flies much under the radar. There are two sorts of pressure on the media. Trump is, of course, trying to exercise direct pressure. I mean, whoever it was, Reuters or somebody who refused to call it the Gulf of America and continued to call it the Gulf of Mexico.
AP, I think.
Yeah. And he says, okay, well, then you can't come to these press conferences as if anybody wants to sit there and listen to him anyway. They're standing up. Okay, he tried to put the pressure there. We're not going to change. But there's a very different pressure, which is plutocracy. I mean, the New York Times was bought by Jeff Bezos, and the LA Times, the Washington Post was bought by Jeff Bezos. The Los Angeles Times was bought by, I don't know the name, but some other, some very rich person. The amount of wealth, as we know, is so concentrated in very few hands that there are these plutocrats, and their view is very simple. We have all the money, we should control everything. And the pressure at the Washington Post came straight from Bezos, and at the LA Times came straight from the owners. That pressure they can't, because they own it, they can just fire those people.
Inside pressure.
Inside pressure, absolutely. Inside pressure of the rich feeling we are entitled to control everything.
If they want to control everything, the biggest problem for them would be probably educated, well-informed voters. Should we recognize that question from Trump's perspective in targeting educational department of the government, for example?
I myself am very wary of attributing anything that looks like intelligent long-term planning to Trump. I mean, I don't think he's clever enough to think, if I undercut education, then that will eventually change the electorate or whatever. He's just, I hate educated people because they don't like me. And so I'm going to cut out as much money as I can to the educational system. I mean, that's his level of thought. He's not a strategic thinker, right? I don't think the attacks on the idea is Trump reflexively wants to destroy anything that liberals like. Liberals like education. They like fine arts. They like human rights. They like national parks, right? All of these things they're cutting. And it's just, I'm going to do everything I can to make you angry. I mean, the Republican mantra, and I'm not making this up, is make the libs cry, right? Do anything the purpose of it is not to help anybody, not even their own voters. The purpose of it is to make the other people upset. And you think about renaming the Gulf of Mexico. What's the point? The point is to make people angry. And I think Trump thinks that way.
I would a little bit disagree that attack on education did not start with Trump. It started way before Trump. Because I do agree with you. I think politicians usually don't like very well-educated people because they think. It doesn't mean universities are certainly, we are not educating people to think this and that. We are educating them to think. And once when you start thinking, in most of the cases, you are able to evaluate the facts. And the moment you are able to evaluate the facts, then facts dictate what positions you're going to take. If they don't like that, they don't want educated people. And as I said, attack on university started way before Trump.
And let me add one more thing here, which will be very familiar to anyone in ex-Yugoslavia, which is, again, just a different aspect to this. Politicians love to have enemies, right? They love to get their voters by telling their voters, you are being oppressed by somebody else, and I'll fight for you against them. Now, in the entire Republican Party, again, for years, this does go back long before Trump, the enemy are the elite who live on the two coasts and sneer and look down at people in flyover country, right? They love this narrative because it makes all the people who live in the middle of the country think, oh, those bad elites hate us. Well, who are the elites? Educate people with PhDs, people with, educated people. They're just a convenient political punching bag. Now, up until Trump, I think the Republicans would use the rhetoric to get elected, but then they didn't go and think, let's tear down the Department of Education. And the difference with Trump is he's just playing out he's saying, well, if they're the enemy, then I'm going to hit them as hard as I can everywhere I can.
And talking about all of that, a huge question behind everything is, who are those people who thought that Trump should do what he's doing now? So, question for both. Who are those Trump voters?
Well, those are two different questions.
Okay.
I think it would be hard to find many people who voted for Trump thinking he would do what he's doing now. Certainly the rich who really supported him didn't think he would be tanking the stock market, right? Okay. And creating an actual tariff war that's going to destroy their wealth. I mean, look at how much wealth they've lost. So they weren't expecting this. I don't think most of the voters, the voters weren't expecting that he would let Elon Musk take a chainsaw to the Veterans Administration and, cut off social and attack Social Security and so on. Nobody voted for that. So I don't think he's doing what anybody wanted, to tell you the truth.
And that other part of the question, who are those people who voted for him, believing that he will be a little bit different president?
As you said before, there are different people, right? This is, again, different people with their own ideas what Trump is good for. So some people, particularly I think businessmen on the Wall Street and so on, they thought Trump is good for us. How is he good for us? He's going to cut taxes and any kind of regulations. That's always business. Business doesn't like taxes and business doesn't like regulations. So there is a part of those people who voted for Trump. As I said, there are some parts of the people who voted for Trump because people feel left behind. And there is a huge number of people in Middle America, this flyover country, jobs are gone. They don't have education. They don't have perspective or in any way to improve their lives. And so their big thing was, I'm going to bring jobs back. I'm going to improve economy and so on. You have a group of people, of course, who are racist. We should not pretend that it's not the case, or sexist or something like that. Want to go back to some kind of society where the white male was on the top, this being a man, right? What they talk now, we are going, going back to, I don't know which time, 60s?
50s.
So 50s, women were left in the kitchens raising children, and the blacks didn't have any rights, and so on. So you have conglomerate of these different interests, right? These people, we're going to bring the real man back. And you see how they're giving over these signals to these groups, like either racist groups or sexist group. I mean, I think they brought these people, this brother state from Romania, and they're parading them around and nobody says anything. In Republican Party, there always was for family values and so on. The same like anti-Semitism. Anti-Semitism is such an opportunistic thing for Trump because on one hand, Colombia is punished because of anti-Semitism. On the other hand, Elon Musk has a Nazi salute there twice nothing happens.
Which of those groups is maybe most important for Trump or most dangerous for democracy also?
Yeah, I think everything was exactly right. And once you realize that there's not a single Trump bloc that thinks alike, right? There are a bunch of different pieces of it, and he appeals in different ways. Many of them will say, I don't like Trump himself, but I like his policies. Lots of them don't care about his policies. They like that he's a jerk and a bully. Okay, they like that about him.
For a while. For a while.
Yeah. Well, as long as he's bullying the people they identify as, the people oppressing them, I'm your vengeance. I mean, one has to bear in mind that in 2016, the actual electorate voted for Hillary Clinton by almost 3 million votes. Now we have this funny, electoral college business that allowed Trump to get in, even though the actual people preferred Hillary Clinton. 4 years later, they voted in a big way for Biden and to kick Trump out. Now, because of some inflation, which wasn't his fault, basically, and because he got old, the Democrats, Biden withdrew and Kamala Harris, well, she's a woman and she's black, so she had things to fight against. But it's not like this last election was some big endorsement of Trump. And as I say, now he's underwater. Even now, more people disapprove of him than approve of him. So I don't think there's one group. He put together this weird coalition, and also because he was a TV celebrity, which is a weird thing, but like Reagan, he leveraged his celebrity. He leveraged this appeal to these, they had Fox News on his side, this and that, and they cobbled together a win. I wouldn't say any one piece of that was the biggest piece of it. And pretty much and then a lot of people just sat out the election. That many fewer people voted this time than 4 years ago. And what were they thinking? I don't know. They're obviously not paying much attention, because how could anybody pay attention and say, I don't see much difference between these two candidates?
Are you worried because of that?
Well, of course, it's worrisome when the public isn't paying attention, because then they can make terrible decisions.
But may I just say one thing apropos that, because I understood you also asked the question, which of these group is somehow most important for Trump in a sense to survive?
Yes.
And I think actually it's the businessman. Economy is the most important.
But he's making biggest mess there right now.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. And I was just reading how there was some impromptu meeting at Yale of this businessman before meeting with Trump. And then they were saying some things they don't say to him. And one of the things was what they were saying is, when things go 20% down, then they cut the line. That cannot be allowed anymore. So they worry. And I think the push is going to come much more from economy than from anything else. But economy is always connected with with the businessmen and so on. So I think this is the group that can easier and probably the most damage for Trump not to survive.
Right, but I think we need to parse a little bit. Who does Trump need to survive? Unfortunately, the answer is nobody. He's elected. He's unless he gets impeached and removed, which is doubtful, or they use the 25th Amendment. or if he dies, he's going to be there for 4 years. He doesn't need anybody. There's no real way to get rid of him. So when you say, what does he need to survive? Unfortunately, the answer is nothing.
I thought long-term politically,
Yeah, but I don't think he has a long-term. He does not have any long-term political
plans.
Prospects. After 4 years, he's gone, and that's the end of that.
No.
Are you sure that he's gone after 4 years?
Yes.
I'm not sure.
Why not?
I'm not sure. I mean, look, we also thought he's going to be gone after 2020 election. He was never gone, right? He was for 4 years, he was around. I remember the night Biden won, I thought, I don't have to now hear about Trump anymore. No, he was there around. His ambitions to be, on the center of attention. It's more than anything, center of attention will not stop.
Why I asked, is he over? I understand that,
He can't get rid. Look, let me just make him. After his first loss, of course, I thought that the Republicans would just shun him. They tried a little bit, and then it didn't work. They tried to switch over to DeSantis or whatever. But literally, he has no future. I mean, he can't be reelected again.
You're not afraid of him talking about third mandate.
He can talk about making Canada the 51st state. What do I care? It's against the Constitution. He can't do it.
So you're not
and
afraid.
He's not going to be a political kingmaker for somebody else. One thing Trump will never do is put effort to elect somebody other than Trump.
So you're not afraid of some kind of political chaos at the end of his mandate?
Am I afraid that they're going to amend the Constitution between now and then so he can run again? No, that can't possibly happen. Am I afraid that he's going to install himself as king against the Constitution? No.
But then it might be chaos.
Well, there'll be people yelling.
There are people exactly what you say. They make noise about the third run.
I have to tell you, I'm a little bit afraid of his saying several times, you won't have to vote ever again.
Yeah, and then when they...
From our part of the world, it doesn't sound good.
Of course, but then when they push him on that, then he says, all I mean is I'm going to fix everything so quickly that you won't have to worry anymore because, the United States will be great again, and how you vote, I mean, he look, again, he says that Canada is going to be the 51st state. Of course it isn't going to be the 51st state. There's no conceivable way that can happen. I mean, you can't take anything he says that seriously.
I know, but there are some Republicans who are calling for the third term because, they are trying to please Trump, like Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham said, look, we should think about the third term for Trump. So there are obviously a pressure on one part of the Republican Party to somehow go around for the third term.
Well, I would say there's pressure to suck up to Trump, which they do, but Lindsey Graham knows as well as anybody else there's no conceivable way he can get a third term. It's not constitutionally allowed.
Well,
can I ask you then at the end of our conversation, so you are actually optimistic on a long-term perspective of United States and following that, the world?
It's going to be, we're going to go through a chaotic time. Certain damage will happen that cannot be fixed. People are going to die in Africa. I mean, he's cutting off programs. If he can, he would sell off the national parks to, coal. I mean, damage will be done. I don't want to suggest, but I don't think it's the end of the country. I don't think we're looking at that. And as I say, to take what Trump says and worry about some of it strikes me as no, because we know he just runs off at the mouth all the time with no facts, with nothing backing it up. He says whatever's convenient or whatever he wants to say. I'm not going to lose a lot of sleep over worrying that he's going to somehow abolish the presidency or become a king or something like that in any literal sense. It can't happen. But he can do a lot of damage. And he's going to do damage. He's doing damage to the standing of the United States in the world and to our alliances. And certainly any other rational country is going to say, why would I sign a treaty with the United States if they have people like Trump who will then just ignore the treaties he himself supposedly negotiated? So he's going to do damage to the country. There's no doubt. But I don't think he's going to install himself as an emperor.
And what can be done to minimize that damage by academia, by scientists, by intellectuals, by politicians, by citizens in general?
I think, and it's slowly happening, for people to fight back. Tim always says, oh, let's wait for a couple months, what Carvel said, and then. It's actually already in Congress. When you have push, you see the consequences of that push. It's good to push back. In some sense, everybody were in the shock after the election and just didn't know what to do. After the first time when Trump was elected, there were literally demonstrations every single day on the street. I'm not saying they resulted in anything very much, Women's March and pro-democracy and this and that. But there are lots of things that people do to push back. And universities can push back. Mm-hmm. Simply not go along with his policies, not be complacent in all these things. Mm-hmm. And after a while, you see what happens with him. If you have a push, he withdraws. The same like with tariffs. I'm going to impose tariffs. Everybody said, no, this is a stupid idea. You shouldn't do that. And then later, oh, no, I will not impose tariffs.
I will postpone them.
Yeah, exactly.
Look, I completely agree with that. I mean, I don't want to suggest. I think one of the great things that happened was, and I don't know how much it was covered here, that Trump had a meeting with the governors of the states. And they want to get rid of all of this. So, the rights of transsexuals and colleges to compete and so on, right? And in Maine, they're not doing that. And the governor of Maine was in this meeting, and he said, she. No, I know I'm talking about Trump.
Yeah.
He called her and said, what's going on in Maine? And she said, we are going to follow state and federal law, which, as she understands it, says they can't do what Trump wants to do. And Trump tried to bully her and said, essentially, we're going to cut off all your federal funds if you don't do what I want. And she just said, I'll see you in court.
And not only
and she did it publicly. She stood up to him. She said, I'm not going to be bullied by you. And I think academics should do that. I think universities should do it now. The universities, of course, are at some risk if he can arbitrarily cut off their funds, but the courts should stand up and say you can't arbitrarily cut off the funds to a university because they said something you don't like. And the more people who stand up to him, the more he's seen to be a paper tiger, right? A guy who bloviate and yell at you, but doesn't actually have the power to do anything. And that'll help because then more people will stand up.
Let's finish here with that thought. Thank you very much for joining us. Have a safe trip back to United States. Hvala i vama što ste bili s nama. Bile su ovo Ideje.hr.